Happened to me.
This is Ed in San Diego. That's a picture I took of the skyline a couple of years ago. That's from the airport Sheridan, and I live to the right, my right of those green lights. If you see those green lights, the green lights are on the top of the Westin Hotel, and just across the street is the street I live on called State Street, and goes down to the right. And if you go further right, then you get into Seaport Village and the tourist district, which is the convention center, Hyatt, Marriott, Hilton, and some fancy apartment towers, condo towers. You can't see
Good
it from
area.
this shot.
It's going
Uh,
to be hopping today along that area.
in the
Going to be
rain,
vibrant.
yeah, in the rain. Yeah, the gas lamp is right opposite the convention center, and that's been busy. There's a huge 20,000 convention going on this week. They'll be partying later, that's for sure. So this summer, late summer, SHRM, the National Society of Human Resource Management, is coming into San Diego Convention Center with 25,000 people, including me.
Mhm.
All right, so this is about, I called it Developing International Business Relationships. Philip Berry, my friend and client for 25 years, has changed the name to benefit his own intention. And I'm really happy that he did that because it's motivating to me to think broader. And his is strengthening international business relationships. And we're going to find out all about that. And you guys and anybody else out there who chooses to join us this morning here um, will be able to communicate with you and the audience. This is really going to be a dynamic program. But before we get into that, I want everybody to get to know each other a little bit deeper. Stephen, what is new and exciting for you in your world of business, having been very successful with Humany leadership as a speaking gig, as the book, of course, and your coaching?
Well, thanks, Ed, and happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody. I love the topic that Philip said because I've lived most of my adult life outside the United States. I lived in Asia for 21 years, lived in Australia for 12 years, and Mexico City for 3 years. And, there's a big difference when you're living overseas in a different country. You really get to understand the culture, the background, the history, understand the people better than you do if you're just a tourist or a business person who, travels there 2 or 3 times a year. What's new and exciting in my life, and it's funny you bring that up, is for some reason, this is how life works. I now have 3 clients in India that I'm working with actively all of a sudden, none of whom I had a year ago. So for some reason, India is on my radar, including a global pharmaceutical company that has factories in New Jersey and Long Island, New York, and things like that. One's a consultancy company, and the other's a high tech company with operations in Silicon Valley. So that's new and exciting in my life. All of a sudden, I'm up at all hours of the morning to having phone conversations with people in India. So
So
uh,
it's 12 and a half hours, I think, right?
it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
indeed. I often have 5:30 a.m. phone calls in the morning before they go to bed. Or, I'm sorry, before they leave work. So that's new and exciting. So lots of coffee on my horizon these days.
We have over 1,000. I don't know the exact number, but people in India, mostly connected with human resources and the relocation business. But really, it's a strong market for us. Uh, David Edick, president of the San Diego World Affairs Council. Um, how's it going? Are you happy with that work?
Certainly is interesting times. Everything's on fast forward. You've got me early this morning, so I'm I don't know what's happened in the last 8 hours or so while I was trying to sleep. Yeah, this is an interesting time. Decades are happening in weeks. Just tremendous change. Not all of it's pleasant either. Some of it's going to be a real challenge for the corporate world. A lot of which is trying to separate the noise from the signal of what's going on. And I think burnout is going to be a big factor. Um, but for right now, the um, investment is experiencing some real headwinds. For the World Affairs Council, it's great because we're intensely busy and people are really paying attention and want to be engaged more.
Where are you based, David?
San Diego,
You in San Diego?
yes.
So I was invited by a publisher based in London to write an article about economic development in view of, and this is not political, but in view of what President Trump has been trying to do with Build in America, Make it in America. And so I I thought long and hard about doing that because I didn't want to become a target of anybody. And yet doing this talk show and the increasing reach of the talk show through its subsequent distribution across YouTube primarily, and of course LinkedIn, is a huge reach out there, which is uncontrollable. I can't control that other than just stop doing it. So I was very reluctant. And so that Courtney is his name. And the name of the magazine is FDI Alliance, Foreign Direct Investment Alliance. I'll send you all the article. It's a link. I put it together not from an opinion point of view, and I was very careful to state that clearly, but from a compilation of published news reports from various sources. And he published it, and he is promoting me through his international business contacts as the producer host of this show as a go-to resource. So what I did was republish news from Wall Street Journal, and several other credible sources about the success that President Trump has been experiencing, some of which has already been in progress before he was inaugurated, but that he's doubled down on everything as he likely to do, and stuff as we know now. So there's a huge influx, if it all happens, if the economy doesn't blow up first and then everybody changes their mind about making these investments, huge dollar value of commitments by Apple, by Hyundai, Toyota, Taiwan in semi company in mostly Arizona and Texas. Just huge amounts. And if it is all true, it will be great for America, that's for sure. But the damage that's being done, or has been done, and the uncertainty, and it's it's not a happy thing. And Dave, you just said it. It's tumultuous and dangerous and uncertain and worrisome. And people are not making investment decisions at my level. I'm not having a successful advertising result. And yet I have a huge interest level in watching this show and others that I've been producing in the rerun, in the streaming, free access 24/7. And that's good. It helps the speakers get a bigger audience. It helps whoever is sponsoring get more eyeballs.
So
And
I'm going to jump in here for a minute, Ed, to work on what you're talking about here. So the change in the name of this series that Philip has come up with, that name change, I think is really spot on. I think it's very much the time to strengthen relationships. Obviously, in terms of business relationships, it'll come down to profitability over time, and professionals will make those decisions. And, you really, I think many of us don't really know what the landscape is going to look like 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 years from now. But those relationships are bankable over time anyways. So this is the time to connect, with in amidst all this confusion and turbulence, and try to create that signal and separate the noise. So I like this.
100% right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're waiting for a couple of people to enter the room. They've said they wanted to enter, and I pushed the button, so that's why I'm just looking around here. Okay, we'll go forward.
We're here.
Yeah. So Novartis and Roche, Genentech are targeting La Jolla, Sorrento Valley, and not downtown San Diego, for huge billions of dollars of investments in manufacturing and research that will begin, is San Diego bound, according to the Wall Street Journal. And I checked them out, and I looked at their company's websites, and it's true. They decided to, I don't know whether President Trump had anything to do with those decisions, because San Diego's really strong as a biotech, but it's now going to get huge. You must enjoy knowing that, Dave.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Right.
A lot of the investments were probably going to come anyways, because you're right. We do have the skill set here, and we've got a really deep ecosystem for it. Politics is interfering with business in a lot of ways right now.
Right.
And I do recommend caution in reading too much into a company's plans or promises. These are like pledges for, some sort of a, fundraiser or something like that. It's not what people say, it's what they do. It's not what companies say, it's what they do. And if the economy here turns difficult, as talk about being fully valued in every sense of the word, the U.S. economy, U.S. society is pretty stretched. We'll see what happens. But one of the areas of trade pressure is on particularly pharma companies that have been taking advantage of the tax loophole in Ireland to, shelter profits generated in the U.S. through intellectual property and through sales in Europe and Asia. It'll be interesting to see how those big pharma companies adjust to that pressure, because that's coming. Doesn't matter what administration. I mean, in the first quarter, $70 billion worth of pharmaceuticals was front imported into the U.S. to get ahead of any tariffs, and just enormous numbers. So the pharma world is one area that there's a lot of turbulence and real change forthcoming that probably should happen, I think.
So the impact in San Diego from economic development here, there's no place for new people to buy a home that's going to be under $1 million. And who's paying for all that? I mean, these people aren't aren't making huge salaries, you know, $500,000 and up. That's what it takes to buy $1 million home.
I was hoping you guys could tell me the answer to that question.
So I'll tell you what's happening out in Coachella Valley in Palm Desert region. It's an economic boom that's going on, has been going on, but it's really taking off right now from a housing construction point of view. And it's driven by investments from Cal State University, who's building a campus from scratch along I-10. And Disney Corporation is has already bought a huge amount of land next to where the guy from TV Guide, Sunnylands, had his property on Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope. You know, right across the street is this huge Disneyland that's going to be built, housing a man-made lake. Homes start in just over 1 million and go up from there, they say. They haven't built one yet, but they're starting to. But all this huge investments. But what's really driving it is further out to the east of Palm Desert into Indio along I-10, which is the wind zone, and very sandy until now. They're building multifamily homes, apartments, and for sale. And the pricing is, relatively speaking, cheap, meaning under $500,000, closer to 300,000. It's unheard of in Southern California in new construction. But that's the demographic change that's happening in Coachella Valley, and people are moving into it. And this huge construction going on, has been going on, but now it's just really impressive to see all this happening that used to be just miles and miles of white sand. And there's still plenty of sand out there. But okay, so I want to move on to Philip Berry. He has a wonderful presentation here, and then we're going to discuss. Philip?
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me let's put up the first
So this is about branding and about how to think about your corporate brand and the personal brand and how they mesh, and the key here is international relations.
yeah. So this is the thing, right? The issue really has to, since I've worked as VP of HR, I was the VP of HR for different international divisions. So at one time I had Eastern Europe, Russia, Middle East. Another time I had Middle East, all of Africa. Then another time I had Latin, all of Latam, you know, from Chile and Argentina, all the way up to El Salvador, Guatemala, all of that, and everything in between. You know, and then another time I was VP of HR for all of Western Europe when I was living overseas. And so one of the things when I talk about this topic from the standpoint of business, I really have focused a lot on helping individuals who happen to be in one country to think beyond, to think about their career and their impact on a basis that is beyond their country borders. And so like when you're in a certain country, then you say, well, what I want to do is I want to be international in some way. But when you continue to go, the next step in that transition is to think of yourself as a global resource. And then how can you strengthen global relationships? And so, for example, when I would do career planning inside the organization, I was helping them to think of their career in a very long term, from a very long term, multi-country perspective, which is global. And so when you're thinking about it in that way, then you begin to think about who you are, what your contribution is, what your capabilities are in a much broader sense than you did than if you were just saying, well, I'm coming from Costa Rica, or, I'm coming from Malawi, or I'm coming from France. It's a whole different ball of wax. And so that's what I want to talk about with the participants who would come in, about how they can think about themselves from a global perspective. And so I want to just give some examples, and then I'll talk about that once I can figure out how to move forward. Yeah, so like what I'm saying is that when you're thinking of moving forward as an individual, then you're saying, well, am I getting the right type of impact? And how do I generate that? And what do I do differently? The whole key has to be on what can I do differently so that the impact that I'm getting is aligned with the intentions. And so I want to outline this from the standpoint of what I'm calling 4 critical strategies, that are required if you're really going to have a global impact. Because some individuals, in fact, have always seen themselves, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a visit to a country, and then I'm going to come back to my home country. So it's just they're thinking international, because they're saying, well, I want to just go to this other country, and then I'll have a nice sweetheart arrangement for two years, maybe 3 years, and I'll come back. But then that doesn't expand their capabilities, and it doesn't expand the contribution that they can make to the company. And it doesn't help the company, because then they don't have those type of global, what I call global resources, as opposed to people just who have maybe a 1 or 2 country type of impact. And so I want to do this in 4 areas, which I want to talk about, which is developing, and it's not just your brand, but it's your leadership brand. What is your leadership brand? And then I want to talk about it from the standpoint of the values that individuals have, which drive behaviors, because it's all, even as I'm coaching and working with people now, I find that the type of behaviors that you have need to change. They need to be modified. They need to be strengthened in a way that helps you to improve your impact. And so also when you're looking at it from the standpoint of behaviors, then you're also looking at the distinctive competence that you have, and how do you increase your distinctive competence? And then I want to talk about revisiting the why. And then, and matter of fact, it should be the why and the how. And I'll give you 4 examples that would encompass what an individual's why and what an individual's how should be, that would serve as a framework for them to go back up this paradigm to say, okay, well, let me look at my distinctive competence again. Let me look at my values, and then look at the type of leadership brand that I have. And so that's why I call it rebranding rebranding oneself based on that perspective. Because then when you're rebranding, you're looking at your distinctive competence, your values, and your vision, but it starts understanding where you are from the standpoint of your values, and where you are now. And unfortunately, terribly so, individuals look at branding as like some type of slick type of advertising stuff. But it's not really that. It's the strategic essence of your own DNA. People don't see themselves as a brand. They don't see themselves as the entity, the asset that the company is using in order to help improve their performance. So, and so from that standpoint, everybody has a brand, but everybody doesn't always know what their brand is. And that's the most important piece here. And that's the sad piece, because individuals don't understand what it is. Do you see yourself? Do others see you the way you see yourself? And, because everybody thinks, well, in their own country, what's so critical about this particular picture from the standpoint of this conversation is that many individuals will grow up in their organization, and they become a king or queen of their country. However, if we're talking about developing and strengthening international relations, and then you are looking at yourself in a very different way. It reminds me of when my like my son and daughter, they when we were living in Paris, and so they went to the schools there in the school system, and then they came into the U.S. and came back into the university system there. And when they went to UPenn and NYU and UT, which is where my daughter got her doctorate, they start from the stage, the point where, oh, they are they are the head of their kingdom in the school that they're in. But then they go into a college where you have a number of other people who are kings and queens of their area. And so it means that you have to develop a whole different perspective in terms of how you operate and how you work and how you succeed and how you drive success. And that's something that I also see with all of us who are involved in hiring people, into our companies, and we see that they really view themselves very strongly from where they are, but they don't necessarily see themselves as being I'm also running. I'm not the only one that's running. Everybody else is running too. So who are you really? And how can you outline your branding so that way you can improve your impact? So because the brand, to be specific, it's what will you do or what will you not do? Clarifies who you are and who you are not. And then it provides more identity, purpose, and direction. And so when an individual is beginning to look at themselves, they say, well, I see myself in a certain way, but then, and that's my concept, but that's not the whole picture. The other part of the picture is how other people see you. And that's the piece that really has to change, because individuals can wind up being the uh, the vice president of marketing in their area, vice president of finance, for their particular country, vice president of the supply chain. However, if they are going to have a global impact, then it means that they are going to be pitted against others. Like those of us who have structured succession planning know that what we do is we look at the whole line of individuals. And then we say, okay, we're here are all of the kings and queens of their particular function, but then can they be the head of the realm on a global basis? And what does it take in order to do that? And how do we structure their next few years of work so that they're able to do that? And especially for people who are in the relocation area, the one part that relocation companies don't focus on as much. They put a lot of effort, like maybe 80-90% of the effort into making sure that the person is established in the country that they're in, and that their family is set and established. They're feeling that they're acclimated. However, they don't connect as well with the other 10% that is going to move the person to their next assignment. They don't connect an individual with what is required in order to help them to develop a global career, as opposed to just developing a nice international relationship with the people in the country that they're in. So that's, to me, that's the paradigm shift that relocation companies have to go through. And they haven't done that. When we listen to the presentations that I've listened to over the last 20 some years, Ed, with this. You're going to ask a question, Ed, I thought?
Yeah, you know what? It is the rage right now. It's way overdue. Now, people in the know already have known this, but they've been very, very reluctant to make waves because there's big bucks involved and a lot of prestige when you get Fortune 500 companies to want to do business with your relocation company. So they're very, very careful. But now it's because of remoteness and the ability to do a TV show, in other words, Zoom or whatever, and it works. The people are not trained to be camera ready, and they blow it a lot. People don't want to look at me so much. They'd rather look at Philip, okay, or they'd rather look at John Verico. And so how do you mesh all that stuff together when you're using Zoom a lot? And yet the cost of relocating a family or just one person is huge. And the psychological safety factor has been, for the most part, absent. Companies have been reluctant to offer training, counseling, connection, and even talk about issues of being isolated. But when you, Philip, went into Paris, it was at the right level and you had plenty of resources to use. But a lot of people who are younger, who do not have that privilege, are still put on assignment because they've said, "Oh, this is exciting. I want to do it." But then they're isolated. They become the other. They're not local. And the locals are very reluctant to make friends with a stranger. Okay. And so the people, particularly if there's a tension in the family relationship while on assignment, it screws it up and the assignment fails. And there's millions of dollars and lost and confusion, and careers are broken unless they figure it out, unless they have counseling, unless they have people to talk
Yeah.
to. Anyway, I'll stop talking. It's your topic.
I think it's well said. In 1989 was when, like, first, a lot of my global thinking started when I was at Procter before I came to Colgate-Palmolive. But let me just talk about the Colgate example for a second. When the Berlin Wall came down, and I went in with the assignment of helping to develop full-fledged business subsidiaries with a team from marketing, from finance, and supply chain. And so then we went into Romania, and we went into Poland, we went into Czech Republic, which was Czech Republic at the time, and Hungary and Turkey, and then also into Russia. And then we went into those countries looking at acquisitions, looking at mergers, or looking at how we can start greenfield operations. And so when you first go into those countries, you're thinking, like, the first stage is thinking, how do I develop the business and then the people in a particular country. The next stage, from an executive standpoint, is how do you develop a global cadre of leaders who can move anywhere based on the skills that are required. So for example, what we did was we said, well, we're going to move into Romania. Romania has a marketplace that is very similar to Guatemala. very, very similar from that standpoint. And as El Salvador. And so we said, from the standpoint of the people, the way the market is set up. And so we began to think of the global cadre of people that are needed, who have those skills, who can operate in a number of those different areas. And so when we developed, for example, finance, let's talk about the functional expertise that's required. So we said, well, in Romania, what do we have? We have to have an individual who understands hyperinflation. Well, you don't understand that if you're just looking at it from the U.S. market. And then we career planned a person who would move from Romania, then to Zimbabwe, then to Turkey, then to Russia, because those are all hyperinflationary markets. And so that's when you begin to think about yourself as a global resource and not just a person who is developing an international relationship with one country or another. You have to, and that's, so what's required is that people need to have, I look at things, I mean, I was in the C-suite, all right? And so in the C-suite, you begin to look at the business from a different standpoint. And if you look at the business and what your goals are from a different standpoint, then you come down to the micro level and begin to look at issues like training. and personal branding and all of that. But where do you begin? You begin to look at what is the business that's required. That's why even as like one of the consulting assignments I'm working on now is helping an individual who can strengthen his capabilities in the Philippines, moving not just through Manila, but let's look at Davao and let's look at Sabril and a few other areas there. I mean, or if you are in, when we were in Russia, look, thinking beyond just Moscow, but thinking about St. Petersburg, or I can go on and on with other countries there and how one needs to think in those areas. So you start by understanding what your brand is, and then moving on to rebranding. And so this is where, and then what you do is you think about your distinctive competencies. So this is where all individuals have competencies in certain areas. And so we what we do is we hire people out of school, based upon their technical competencies in a certain area, whether it's law, whether it's engineering, or whatever it happens to be. And then as they begin to move through the organization, they increase their management skills, they increase their leadership skills, and then they move into potentially into more senior roles. And then the interpersonal skills become more prevalent, more important.
So Philip, what you're saying is that a company such as Colgate is an extension of the university. It's a learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it definitely is. And that's why one has to develop. Like I was the vice chair of the board of trustees for the City University of New York, for about 10 years. And so it's like 25 different colleges and universities, the law school, the medical school, all of that, were within that framework. And so what we began to do is to think about how can we as a university be more relevant to industry. It's not just graduating people so that they can get a degree, but how can we develop the long-term relationships with companies so that way we are always a resource to them, because continuous training and development has to take place. It's what Toffler said. It's like you can't the future doesn't belong to those who can just read or write. It belongs to those who can learn, unlearn, and then relearn. And that's where organizations need to be. And therefore the universe that one has can't just be a corporation or a university. You can't just say, well, university is over here, there's a college, this is a company over there. We have to look at in a systemic manner, at the relationship that is important to all those organizations and also the community that they're in. And so I always tell people, well, identify what your top 3 competencies are. And within the framework that I had there, I say, what are the competencies that you want to develop over the next 3 years? So that to me is a great roadmap for relocation firms to be thinking about their raison d'etre.
Yeah, Stephen, this is all about humanity, isn't it?
There's an aspect of human leadership in here. I would add here, if I was going to interject on what Philip's talking about, is that some of the core competencies that people need to develop, particularly in international assignment, are more of what's the so-called soft skills. For instance, curiosity. When I coach people who are looking at international assignments, or when I've done it in the past, so many of them focus on their core competencies of their financial expertise or their marketing, branding expertise if they're in marketing function. And I always talk about be curious about the country, the people that you're going to be interacting with, learn more about them. And I'll give you a real quick example, and I would encourage everyone today to do this. Ask people, what is Cinco de Mayo? And most people are going to tell you it's Mexican Independence Day, and it's not. It's not July 4th for Mexico. Mexico's Independence Day happens to be in September. Cinco de Mayo is actually the recognition of a small Mexican army defeating a French invasion in 1862, if I recall correctly.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so and that's what I mean. Once it goes back to what I said earlier, when you visit a country, you kind of learn the top of the iceberg. But if you live in other countries, you get to understand this, and you understand the people and the culture. And Cinco de Mayo has nothing to do with Corona beer and beaches and putting limes in your Mexican beer. It's actually has great pride for the Mexican people that they fought off the invasion by France in 1862. So anyway, just a small side point, but yeah, so it's not so much human ed as much as I would say more understanding of people and cultural differences and making that one of the core competencies that you want to develop that Philip's talking about.
Thank you very much. John Verico.
Yes, sir. Boy, I wanted to jump in on this one as well. Steve, you brought a great point about curiosity, and I'll add to that humility as well. Those are really, really key. What it comes down to when we think about it, people are, no matter what our cultural differences are, no matter what our governments are like, no matter what our living conditions are like, people are really the same at the core. There are certain things that are important to everyone, whether that is, our safety, security, family, those types of things that we need to get along with. And I emphasize these elements all the time. I talk about, people need to feel a sense of trust. They need to feel like they have the opportunity to grow and to take care of their family. They need to feel that there is some sort of communication. People don't want to be left in the dark no matter who they are. And most importantly is that human factor, right? And understanding that we're all human beings together. Now, people are still people, no matter where they are. The barriers to our success, the barriers to security, the barriers to safety, those things may differ from place to place and culture to culture and economy to economy. But the basics are still there. And that's why I think it is so important to emphasize those, what Steve called the human skills, the soft skills, that interpersonal stuff. And, Phil, you had that on your list of interpersonal, and you actually mentioned that as last until you get to the senior leadership. And I think that's actually the first thing. When we look to hire people, I'll hire people who have lower technical skills because I can train them. I want to know that interpersonally, they're the right fit for my organization, that they're not going to come in and be negatively disruptive. I'm looking for people who are curious, who have humility, who have critical thinking skills and are willingness to learn. That's the most critical stuff. And if people can get along, we can train them on the technical stuff, and we can groom them for management and leadership positions as they go through their career. But I think most importantly is those, I don't like to call them soft skills. I call them essential skills.
They definitely are essential skills. And especially when you're talking about having individuals who are going to be global, having that cross-cultural competence, is essential. You can't really operate and be successful globally unless you have that type of framework within your DNA and part of your leadership brand. And it has to do, we're talking also about the values that people have that can sustain and reinforce our behaviors. And what you're talking about when we talk about things that John, you and Steve were just talking about, we're talking about the behavioral framework that people have and what are the values that people have, in terms of that, and there are a lot of key values. I mean, this is one set of ways of looking at it. There are others. These aren't the only, 10, but certainly, the being able to have a whole set of to be able to have empathy, and to be able to have understanding, and have humility are extremely important. You can't operate globally very well without having those as essential ways of operating when you go into a place. People don't want this arrogant type of American just coming in
The
and
ugly American.
and coming in with your baseball jokes and all of that, and I mean, which is the way a lot of people go in, but they don't go in really trying to understand how other people look at the world,
Phil, if I may,
please.
when you said baseball, it just reminded me. I'm a fan of all of the old, like really cheesy, bad 1950s sci-fi movies, right? And it's so funny because every time they would kind of test to see whether or not somebody was human or they were, an invading alien in disguise or whatever, they would always ask them about, the who won the World Series in this year, as if everybody should know that in order to prove that they are actually a human being. But you're right. There are certain cultural references that just don't work. And so
Exactly.
we do have to be open and aware of those things. I had a very unique and interesting opportunity over the last God, over a decade now, where I started working with the people originally in Montenegro and then across Southeastern Europe. And they were the government entities there that were trying to rebuild the trust with the community and with their citizenship with the government because they used to be Yugoslavia. And they had a very corrupt government at the time, and everybody split off. All the nation states kind of split off and created, their own little entities because they didn't get along and they didn't trust each other, and they didn't trust government at all. And so what was happening was that at the government level, the government agency level that were providing services to the publics, not the politics side, but the service providing side of government, they were trying to figure out how do we reach our communities again? How do we get people to listen to us? How do we get people to trust us after everything that we've just gone through? And what happened was all of the nation states that used to be Yugoslavia came back together at the government communication level and tried to figure out how they could smooth things out and rebuild this trust with government. I've been on that team with Southeastern Europe for, like I said, for over a decade now, and it was amazing to me. We had 9 nation states sitting in the room, and in just 2 days, 3 days, they created a 2-page document that was an agreement between them about how they can work together and the things that they were going to try to implement to build trust with the people again. Now, if that was in the US, they wouldn't have been able to do that. In 3 days, they might be able to come up with an idea or a framework, and then it would go through lawyers, and it'd be a 800-page document and have to be signed off by everybody and their grandmother and ethics lawyers and everything else, and they'd never be able to implement. But they were able to do that in just a couple of days.
Yeah,
Dave,
that's wonderful. Wonderful.
Dave Edick, you must be liking this conversation. It fits right in with as I understand, uh, the ethos of the World Affairs Council.
Well, that and in my own take on living in an international or a global environment, how my own career has rolled through university, high school, university, and then out into the professional world. And I'm going to have to catch up with John offline here and find out more about what he's involved with. That's really, really interesting. But what Philip is talking about is it does resonate, and I thought the add in on both Steve and John, about what are competencies, and Philip did get that slide up. We're so, yeah, I would say it's not only American centric, but we tend in the U.S. to look at technical competencies first, and those really are, you can pull those blocks out of a bag somewhere in a lot of cases. They're plug and play. What's not plug and play is that are those interpersonal, intercultural, the curiosity. Oh my God. I mean, it's, uh, there are cases where people had great skills and got promoted into a situation that they didn't have that awareness, that curiosity, and that curiosity that's the drive that will help you bridge the unknown, the uncertainties, to make new connections, to meet new people, and to make, to help things happen, be a part of it. If you don't have that curiosity,
Exactly. It's very important.
I
The
I don't know what you do.
the yeah, the whole piece around a lot of this also has to do with people rebranding themselves, and and I just have just a few more slides, not many, just four more, and then we can continue building on the conversation. Uh, you know, but the four areas that people need to focus on when they're especially talking about strengthening their global relationships and being a global resource is, this is the rebrand, looking at your values, looking at your behaviors, looking at your competencies, and looking at how you can do some of those differently than you did before, you know, is important. And it's an opportunity also to rebrand when you're looking at expanding your market or your consumer base, especially when you're working abroad, when you're living abroad, and what you want to do is to figure out how you can be more relevant with the products that you have and with the services that you have and with the new consumers. You talk about curiosity. You have to be curious about how individuals do things like, well, we went into some, not Tanzania, went into Tanzania and wanted to figure out how can we expand the ability to work with people who want to wash their clothes differently, given the resources that they have. So this is how a competency like that can help you to be curious, where you say, well, what happens is that people they're not using washing machines as much, they're using the streams and the rivers. Uh, and then they're using different type of substances, that they combine together. I mean, all of those help you to rebrand and look at things differently. And then also when you want to take advantage of new and emerging trends, like people, we are now in a situation where we need to figure out how to rebrand ourselves, everybody, based on AI. And not see it as at an area that's just going to be something that takes away my job, but how can this expand my job? Now, that's why one of the things I was working with this firm on is how can they develop AI assistants, so that way these individuals can be more empowered, and the type of resources that they bring, the information that they have, how they're making decisions in an organization. And then just when we want to be perceived differently, if you move from one country to another, and if you want to move to another country after that, then how can we rebrand our leadership brand so that way we are perceived very differently, and not just as, oh, this was the person who was very strong in Costa Rica, but now we see him or her very differently. So this is what we mean when we talk about rebranding to be better than you believe. And that's again, going back to those pieces around the brand in terms of a new vision, distinctive competencies and values that sustain a whole new set of behaviors. And this is how you begin to look at what is your new story, writing the new story that you want to tell about yourself and that you want others to tell about you. So that way they're not playing old movies. Like, John was talking about old science fiction movies. There's some people who still operate based on the old movies about them, as opposed to looking at the new movies that they want people to tell. What's the new story that can be told about you as you are progressing in the organization? And that's what we want to do. So
Yeah, thank you.
that's
Thank
what
you so
makes
much.
me
John,
unique.
John, I see that you have to leave. Do you want to say something?
And that's my last slide.
I am so sorry that I have to leave this engaging conversation. This has really been great. I do have to. There's a session being put on by my former organization, the National Association of Government Communicators, and it's about navigating job change in an environment of uncertainty. So I've got to jump into that, but I do have to leave. But I wanted to thank all of you for some really enlightening and engaging conversation. So thank you very much. I put my contact. Please get in touch. I'm on LinkedIn, and that's in the chat if anybody's interested.
Yeah, we're all interested.
Yeah,
John, thank you so much
like
for
to
your
learn more
time.
about your work.
Yeah, and
Thank
I
you.
want you to
Thank
come back, John, and let's do a session with you in the lead um, on what you learned today from that topic that you
This has
just
been great.
announced.
Yeah.
I will also like to just add one thing, and we just talking about the fact about living in different places around the world. And I put this in the chat too, but I'm going to emphasize it verbally for those people who are only listening. As residents of this planet, we live in an international environment, no matter where we actually reside. So we keep saying, oh, we're going to live internationally, we're living in other countries. We're still living in an international environment, no matter where that actually is. And if we remember that, then we can build and strengthen our global relationships and we can avoid conflict.
Exactly right.
John, thank you.
Yeah.
Philip, this has just been a wonderful
Thanks,
talk,
guys.
and we can continue if you guys want. John, please come back.
I
Take
definitely
care,
will.
John.
Thank you. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
Yeah.
John.
Talk soon.
Yeah, Phil,
Without you.
Phil, I really enjoyed the show that you put on here. This has just been a great thing to experience for me, and I just love how you put that together. And I'm going to look. I always look at these shows a couple of times, but uh, I've learned so much today from looking at your slides and from this conversation. Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. I mean, I think what happened, you spurred a lot of thinking in some areas, so that way I could reposition like some of the things. Like there might be one or few of those slides that I put up there that you may have seen in other places, but I was repositioning stuff based upon the topic as you introduced it, and it really got me to thinking deeply and going back to saying what is and also thinking deeply about the type of work that I'm doing now and my own purpose, and what I'm doing now and what's required. And matter of fact, I was just I didn't talk about this before, but I was selected by Who's Who in America, and they wrote an article and some other pieces on me, which were one is going to be in Fortune, something was in Wall Street Journal, might be another one coming up too on Apple News soon, and talking about and I'm really positioning myself to talk about the new type of requirements that leaders ought to have. To me, it's all about a new sense of leadership. It's not about an autocracy. Some people think that autocracy is what's required. I don't think that that's the case. But I think we need to have a whole new perspective to this.
Stephen?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I know you're into all this. So what's your take? Uh, your your approach has always been softer, more humanistic, and helping people learn some new things while doing what's required of them.
Yeah, I'll pick up on Phil's point on autocracy. I mean, I am a little concerned, and I'm starting to see examples of this in the workplace of the bully boss returning, the my way or the highway, people saying, well, this is how the president operates, this is how Mr. Musk operates. I'm going to do the same in my organization. And I'm seeing people leaving. I'm seeing not the great resignation 2.0 yet, but I think people are going to start reevaluating, the situations that they're in, number one. But I'm going to throw something out. It's probably, we need to talk about it, or maybe it's a subject for another show. But I put in the chat box Calvin Coolidge's, famous quote about the business of America is business. And I'm beginning to wonder, with all the uncertainty happening today, particularly around the tariff situation, is America the place to do business? I mean, one thing people don't realize that India's middle class is somewhere between 400 million and 450 million people. Now, that's larger than the entire United States. So if I was an executive anywhere in the world outside the United States, and I was looking at where do I, over the next 5 to 10 years, where am I going to grow my business, my company? I might be taking a more harder look at India than, for instance, in the United States. I mean, we had these conversations about 5 years ago about Russia being the new economic engine of the world. And Mr. Putin kind of screwed that up with his invasion of Ukraine and all the sanctions that happened and impacted the Russian economy. But I'm just worried about the credibility of America right now on the global planet, on the I'm losing my words here, but the credibility of America and whether that's going to impact America business. So the credibility of the American government, let's put it that way, and is that going to impact America business? And are people going to want to partner with this huge gorilla, which the United States still is from an economic standpoint? Are they going to start casting their eyes at India, China? Of course, people have been looking at their middle class, but there's restraints there. But there are other places in the world to do business. And how is this tumultuous era that we're currently in? And it's only 120 days old, I guess. But how is that going to impact long-term American business? That's what's on my mind this morning.
Yeah,
David?
that's
Can I just say, no, go ahead, David.
well, I was just going to say, on the Coolidge thing. So that quote comes from a particular time in American history. In the 20s was, business centric. It was a new era for America, for the United States. We weren't always, a commercialized go-go society. It was the first iteration after an agrarian society. And 5 years later, we had the stock market crash, which morphed into a Great Depression. And the United States and the culture very much lost its way in a big hurry. So, and I think we're in a similar situation here where we've kind of lost our way, because, if business is, it's too narrow a human definition of, talk about brand, and talk about purpose, it's just too narrow. And I think that's part of what's gotten us into trouble and has given rise to this populism. If it all comes down to just the almighty dollar, then, if you're negatively affected, it's pretty tough to get up in the morning. Phil, you were going to jump in with something.
Yeah, no. I mean, I would just build on what you and Steve said, because I'm worried. Being a person who is, I've always seen myself as a global citizen, and I just think that America is going to be in a tough spot unless Americans stand up to be different and show that that we are not. I mean, this whole situation where we aren't, we don't care about the allies that we've had, for years, where we want to like force people into a certain way of thinking. I just can't believe that that is going to sustain America on a long-term basis. And I think it will happen where we'll see the differences occurring in the institutions within the country, where we see younger people thinking differently, where people who can open up their eyes to decisions that have been made maybe a year or so ago, and decisions that need to be made, over the next few years, in order to keep us going. We're going to have a different way of thinking and operating and behaving, and we have to show ourselves. We have to show up differently. I mean, anywhere we go. I mean, so that way people don't get the feeling that this overall type of hate others uh, uh, way of approaching things, is like the new American edict. I just can't believe that that is going to have any feet, to grow over a longer period of time.
I think over time that's the case. I just the the U.S. was in need, socially, politically, and a lot of things. The global relationships were in need of significant reform. We in the U.S. Has always pursued things in its own interest, really, when push came to shove. So we would abide by the rules when it was convenient, and not so much when it wasn't. But now that world has changed. But I just dealing with people in my own neighborhood and all, it's going to take some time for this anger, this populist wave, which runs pretty high up into the economy, or deep into the economy and society. Where it's going to run into some real challenges is the trust issue that Stephen brought up. Uh, these new tariff policies, for example, just washed away a bunch of free trade agreements.
Right.
So you know, regardless of one's opinion about trade, and Trump's is very simplistic, it's very personalistic. There is really no design behind it, and how it's been rolled out has frightened, has really caused people abroad to step back, because they thought they knew who we Americans, America was, and turns out not so much. But this trust issue is going to be really a challenge, and it's not going to be turned around right away. It's going to take, we're going to be in this environment through this administration, at least. And then once we get to the end of it, a lot of damage, a lot of change will have occurred, and then how to reestablish trust. And then it's going to become trust but verify. And
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
new for Americans. We're going to have to show up first
yeah,
and develop that trust again.
no, exactly.
But also that's mistrust is going to be a virus spreading in the world. And it's begun. There are many places actually where these trade conflicts are now beginning to erupt.
Yeah.
East and South Africa.
Mhm.
It's an area where in the South where the opportunity to develop relationships and mutually beneficial trade take place outside the structure of the traditional developing economy frameworks and all. It's a really interesting time, and a
So
big test for America.
Yeah.
after about none of us are old enough to have been there personally, but from history writings, after 1850 or so, uh, I forget what Kissinger called it, Westphalia or Westphalia. I don't know when
Yeah.
wars across Europe were based upon mistrust of your neighbor, of the neighbors. And I guess in the 1800s, and then all that.
1648, I think is the year. But
Yeah.
well, I mean, that was the end of the religious wars, and that states had boundaries, uh, and in order to have international security, you would not question those boundaries, in essence. Um, I don't know how relevant, in the 21st century, a treaty of Westphalia mentality is. I'm not so, I don't know. Um, but this, we do live in an international global environment, and those amongst us in the U.S. that are trying to deny that or to roll it back are kind of fooling themselves. It's a
Yeah,
bit of cherry picking, and they're going to a vision of the past, and when they get there, they'll discover that it's not there anymore. It's in the
right,
past.
right.
Thank you for sharing ideas on this public vehicle here.
Thanks, Ed,
And
for organizing.
Yeah.
look forward to doing this in person someday and in a quiet place.
Yeah, definitely.
Philip, where are you?
I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stephen, where are you at?
I'm in Phoenix.
All right. Well, very, yeah. Well,
Now the same time zone as California. Until the fall. Or who knows? Who knows?
oh, God. All right. So we'll have to meet at, where would we meet, Ed?
San Diego's good. San Diego's good.
Yeah, San Diego's good. Or it'll be easier to get here.
We
But
could,
you know, I'm going on the road. I'm going to come to visit Stephen in Phoenix in a couple of weeks, and but we can. And I'm trying to set up a meeting in New York, Washington, Miami area, and in Mountain View, as well as LA and Irvine. Uh, and I was invited to consider setting up a meeting in Houston. I don't feel like traveling as much as I used to. Like I'm getting really used to sitting here. But I think it's really important to show up and be in person again.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being on the show. I
No,
will
thank you.
send
Thank
you
you.
a copy of this later today. Hopefully Zoom doesn't mess it up uh, between now and then. And you know, for the first time in 5 years of doing this, uh, not here, but last week I was doing a show and I thought I had pushed the record button. I got so into the topic and conversation, I forgot to.
It
I
happens.
forgot to do that. But we got the transcript you see in the bottom, you know, the
Mm.
word for word. But there's no audio, no video. So,
yeah, the recording's on. I see the little.
so I said, mea culpa, you know, and then it said, come back on the show. I'll be better.
Well,
Oh my God.
this has been a good one, Ed. I've heard several things that I'm going to have to think about some.
Oh, I'm going to study those slides, Philip. Thank you.
Well,
And I love your topic, strengthening
yes,
international business relationships. May I take that and run with it?
there you go. Sure.
But I will attribute it to you, not me.
Okay. Definitely.
Enjoy that
Well,
India stuff, Stephen.
yeah. Are you going to go there to India, Stephen?
I might actually be over there in May or June, or not May now, but probably June or maybe July. The monsoon starts in July. We'll see. I don't know. It's a very uncertain time about everything right now.
Yeah.
Right now, I know what I'm doing tomorrow, Philip. Wednesday's unknown.
I know. No, it is. You're right. Yes.
Best
Well,
wishes
listen,
to everybody,
everybody,
guys.
you stay well, and I'll talk to all of you.
David, you need to run for Congress again and
Oh,
sort
God.
Washington, D.C. out.
Okay, now.
Someday I'm going to show up in person to one of your World Affairs Councils.
You have before, and we'll get you something to see. We'll see in person.
All right.
Stay
Thank you.
tuned.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you all.
Take care,
Okay.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Adios.
I love it. Thank you.